Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 9 of AWS Zero to Hero series, and in this video we will deep dive into the concept of AWS S3. In today's video we will learn what is S3, what are the properties, characteristics, features, why S3 is very popular, and along with that we will also do two practical demonstrations in this video. So please watch this video till the end so that you not only understand the theory part, but you also be able to perform these practical things in the video by yourself. To make it simple, what I've done is I have added both the theory part and the demonstration part in our GitHub repository, in the GitHub repository that I'm using for this entire course. So you can go to GitHub and you can open this repository, or you can also use the link in the description. Just scroll down, you will find a folder called Day-9. If you go into the folder, you will see a README document, which will explain the complete theory part, what I'm going to discuss today. And it also has some additional information for the interview point of view. So if you have an interview and if you want to quickly glance through the concept of S3, you can use it as reference. Along with that, like I told you, there is a demos folder. If you go to that, you will find two JSON files, which I'm going to use in today's demonstration. You will understand what exactly these JSON files are and how they will be helpful for you when you execute the demo. So again, please watch it till the end and try to perform these demos at your end. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, because it takes a lot for me to make these presentations, to write all that stuff in GitHub, perform the demos before the video, and prepare this entire video. So your subscribe or your like and share makes a lot of difference for me. Okay, so let's quickly jump onto the video. Like I told you, today's topic is going to be on AWS S3. Let me tell you that S3 is one of the most easy services to learn on AWS. Many times people start their AWS journey with S3 because it is very simple to understand and also execute. The reason why AWS S3 is very simple is because the problem that it is solving is very easily understandable, right? So what is the problem that it is solving? It solves a very common problem of storage. So when I say storage, I think all of us can correlate, and we are all the victims of issues with the storage. For example, these days when we use our mobile phones or when we use the laptops, most of the times we run out of the storage. And what we do is we go and buy a hard disk, or we go and buy a pen drive, and we copy the content into that. We copy our data into that. But what will an organization do, right? So if it was me or if it was you, okay, you can go and buy 500 GB or 1 TB of a hard disk, and you can store your data in that. But for organizations, like when you work for an organization, you deal with a lot of heavy databases, database dumps, continuous backups, your application logs. You have things like dashboards, charts, information for these things, lot of CSV files, Excel sheets. So where organization can save all of these things. Now, in previous classes, we discussed that organizations are moving towards public cloud. Now, if they move towards public cloud, then what is the solution in the public cloud? So the answer for this is Amazon S3. So Amazon S3 is a storage service which solves the problem of what we discussed exactly, right? So organization runs into problems of dumps. They need a lot of storage. And what Amazon said is, don't worry, we will give you a service which is called as Amazon S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service, right? What does Amazon S3 stands for? It stands for Simple Storage Service. So it is a very simple service and it handles the problem very easily and solves it. When we go through the demo, you will also understand. But the major success behind this entire thing, like why S3 has become very popular, is because of this single number. You might be thinking, what is this number? Why this number? What kind of relation this number has with the AWS S3? You will understand when I go into the video, like after 5 minutes, you will be able to relate. Oh, okay. So this number is one of the key factors for the success of S3. Okay, just remember the number. It is 99.999. It's 11 nines. So it is called as 11 nines, right? So there are 11 nines here after 99. So it is popularly called as 11 nines. So like I told you, what is S3? S3 is basically a simple storage service, and it has the characteristics of highly scalable, highly availability, security, cost efficiency, and I missed one point, that is performance as well. So these are the 5 important characteristics of AWS S3. And don't worry, you might be thinking like, okay, you have added the points, but you are not telling about what these things are. I'll tell them once we go through the video. Each and every point, I will take details of each and everything and I'll explain you. But for now, when someone asks you in an interview, why S3 is so popular or what are the characteristics, then you can answer this in a very simple way as shown in the slide. S3 is a simple storage service which has the capabilities of scalability, availability, very good security of the information that you're storing in S3, cost effectiveness, and performance. So, okay, you might be thinking, Abhishek, you told me that, okay, when I run into problems with my laptop, where on my laptop I usually store movies, or on my mobile phone, I usually store some photos. But as a DevOps engineer, I want to understand what kind of files organization has and what kind of files do I store in S3 buckets, right? That should be your first question when you talk about it. So in general, if you move out of this entire discussion from DevOps engineer and all, S3 does not have any restriction. So for S3, you can store pictures, you can store videos, you can store any kind of files and folders, or you can also store some kind of Excel sheets or your reports. But as a DevOps engineer, what you will deal with is application log files, where sometimes you want to keep storage of last 30 days of your application logs, or you have huge databases. Let's take an example called flipkart.com, and let's say Flipkart has all of these user database, right? So all of us who use Flipkart, the information is present in the Flipkart databases, and usually any organization, they take backup of this information. So this backup itself, if you take one single dump of the information, sometimes for heavy organization, that comes to 3 TB, 4 TB of data, the database dumps, as well as the database backups. So how do you store this? Where do you store this? So that's where Amazon comes into picture, and Amazon said that don't worry about this problem, because you have moved to public cloud. We will solve this problem. And S3 was the second service that AWS has introduced. So you can imagine how much important problem was the storage when people move to public cloud. Even now it's a problem, but now there are multiple storage solutions. Back then in 2015 or 16, when AWS has launched this S3 buckets, so it was first of its kind, and it was solving this big problem of application owners or the organization storing these kind of files. So in general, S3 does not have any restriction, but as a DevOps engineer, you deal with this kind of files, that is databases, application logs, or you have informations like Excel sheets for your dashboards, or you have some kind of files, you have huge uh, application supported configuration files. So these kind of things you usually put in S3 buckets. So basically what happens is when you put any content on S3, that is globally accessible. Okay, so I'll show you the demo as well. Don't worry. How to create this S3 bucket, how to upload objects into this S3 bucket, how to delete it. We will see in just 1 minute. But before that, just understand that anything that you upload on S3, you can basically access that objects, using a HTTP protocol, right? So let's say you have created a bucket, and you want to store, let's say the name of the bucket is demo hyphen AV hyphen June 6th. That is today, demo Abhishek.Veeramalla June 6th. Then you can access the content inside this bucket using a HTTP protocol, right? That means if you put content inside this bucket, you can access using https.com, sorry, https slash name of the bucket. Before that, you can put the API of this S3 buckets. So what happens with this is S3 becomes globally accessible. That means you can put your database files or you can put your application logs anywhere in the world and you can access it from anywhere in the world. So if your organization has the database or has that database related information in the US, they can put it in the S3 bucket. People in India, people in Malaysia, they can simply access it using the HTTPS protocol. So that's why S3 is called as a globally accessible service. Because let's say today, if you put a movie in S3 bucket, you can just share the URL of it and you can say that anyone in the world can access that. Of course, you can restrict, but you can say that only your organization people can download it. You can say nobody can download it. We will talk about the bucket policies. But before that, just want to tell you that it's a globally accessible service. Like if you want to give permissions to everyone, you can simply give the permissions to everyone in the world. Now, before going ahead and understanding more characteristics, I think it will be very easy if you understand how to create these buckets in S3. Bucket is very simple concept. Bucket is nothing. Just like when you go to the EC2 service, like let me open the console first. Like let's say you go to the EC2 console, and if you create an output out of EC2, what you will get is basically a virtual machine, right? Or what you will get basically is a compute instance. Similarly, if you go to S3 service, what you get from S3 service is a S3 bucket. And inside that bucket, you can store the information. That's why it's called as a bucket. And this bucket does not have any restriction on how much data can you store, what kind of data can you store. Like technically, you can store TBs, like 100 TB of data in S3 buckets with very less cost, probably $4 to $5. So that cheap it is. Of course, we will go into the video and discuss about storage classes, what storage classes are available, which storage class is cheaper. We'll talk about that. But just to give an overview, in general, there is no restriction of the amount of information that you can store. But okay, I will go there. Like each object cannot be more than 5 TB, but you need to understand first of all, what is an object. So let me not confuse you. So firstly, go to the search bar, click on S3, and you will see something here called scalable storage in the cloud. Click on that button. And this is your S3 landing page. Okay, I have some buckets here, but you can ignore them. What you can do is go and click on this option called buckets. And to your right side, you will find an option called create bucket. Okay, so click on create bucket and just provide the name. And like I told you, this is globally accessible. What does that mean? You need to provide a unique name. Okay, so throughout the world, whoever creates an S3 bucket, that can be globally accessible. So what AWS says is, for the purpose of making it less complex, AWS will ask you to create a unique name. So the S3 bucket name that you put here should be unique across all the AWS accounts. It's not within your AWS account, but it should be across all the AWS accounts. So that's why what people do is, as a DevOps engineers, they try to come up with a nomenclature or they try to come up with a naming standard practice. So if it was me, let's say I'm working for an organization called example.com, what I'll do is I will try to create according to a specific standard. Like if it is for application one team, okay, so I'll say app one followed by, let's say they require it for some feature. So I can add the feature name, probably let's say payments, app one, payments. In which environment is this? Is this production, staging, or UAT or anything? So let me say production, prod, followed by the domain of the company. I can just say example.com. So this does not have to be in a same standard, but as a DevOps engineers, you can create this standard. You can say that in our organization, let's follow this practice. So what happens is that your S3 global name will be unique. If not, I can just come here and create a name called Abhishek. And what S3 will say that, hey, you cannot create this name because someone else is using it. So try to put it in a specific nomenclature. So app one, payments, prod, example.com. Now, if you notice here where my cursor is, you will see that S3 by default, you will see an option called global, but here you will see an option called AWS region. Now you might ask me that Abhishek, you kept on telling that S3 is a global service, then why should I create it in a region? So that's where you need to understand it very clearly, that S3 buckets are scoped in a region. Like you create S3 bucket like EC2 instance only, where you put it in a region, but the only difference is the content in S3 is globally accessible. It's not that S3 buckets are not tied to a region. Usually, any resources in AWS are tied to regions because the nearer the region to your location. Let's say that I am sitting today in Hyderabad, and if I create an S3 bucket in Hyderabad, the advantage that I get is basically the storage is very near to me, so there will be less latency. What is latency? The request from me has to pass through multiple routers, has to reach the AWS data center, and it has to give the response back to me. Now, if I create S3 bucket somewhere in North America, or if I create S3 bucket somewhere in Australia, it will take more time for my request to go there and give the response back to me. So to solve the problem, AWS always use the concept of regions, and any resource that you create in AWS are bound to regions. So here I need to select an AWS region for S3 buckets. And what I'll do is I'll choose the region that is very near to me. For the purpose of demo, let me keep it as is. I don't want to, confuse anyone. So let me keep the AWS region as this, but it is globally accessible from anywhere. Okay, so name is selected, region is also selected. Now what I'll do is go through these characteristics very quickly. Don't worry, at this point of time, you might not understand it. So there is something called bucket ownership. Let's ignore for a while. There is something called block public access. So by default, if you don't enable this one, I mean, by default, public access is blocked. But if you disable this one, what will happen is anyone in the world, they will try to access your resources in S3 buckets. Sometimes this information can be highly sensitive as well. In your organization, probably your database dumps, which has all the user information, is very, very sensitive. And if you don't, by default, it is enabled, but for some reason, let's say someone has unchecked this one, then AWS gives you a warning already saying that if you turn off this one, you might land into some problems. So always keep this enabled. In today's video, when we host a website on S3, you will see me unblocking this one, unchecking this one. I'll tell you what is the reason there as well. Bucket versioning, we will understand what is bucket versioning in future. Don't worry. For now, go with the default option. And by default, S3 buckets are encrypted with respect to the data. I think 6 months back or a year back, this option was not by default. I think 6 months back, AWS has recently come up with this, that they have encrypted objects by default. So this is one good thing. So the server-side encryption is available by default. We will understand about that as well. Now click on create bucket, right? So when you click on create bucket here, where is this option? I think I need to just move this tab. Yeah. So I have created the bucket. I have multiple screens, so sometimes I get confused. Okay, so the bucket is created. If you see, this is the bucket that I am created. App1 payments prod example.com. Now let me show you how to upload information into this one. So it's very simple. Just go here, click on the upload button, and you can upload anything from your laptop. Okay, so click on all files. I have a file here called index.html. Let me put that, and all that you need to do is click on this upload button. As you click on the upload button, you will see the content is getting uploaded, and it got uploaded so quick. Now it is uploaded successfully. So I have this information now stored in S3 buckets. Even if this information gets deleted from my personal laptop, no, I don't have to worry about it, because this information is stored in S3. Now you might ask me, Abhishek, okay, this is stored in S3, but what happens if Amazon's availability zone goes down? You told me that in my organization, we are saving the database dumps or very sensitive information. For some reason, if S3 goes down, or if the region in which I created goes down, what will happen? That's the most interesting part. And that is exactly the number that I have discussed. So if you go back here, what is the number that I was talking about? So just a second, this one. So 99,999,999,999, 11 nines. What does it indicate is the amount of reliability of AWS S3. So Amazon says that you can be rest assured that S3 is 99.99999 11 nines reliable. So if you want to understand this, to just give you an example, if you try to put 1 billion amount of objects, object is nothing but anything that you put in S3 is an object. For example, right now I created this index.html, right? So index.html is an object in S3. Anything that you upload in S3 is an object, because in S3 there is no hardcore requirement, right? You don't, it does not mean you have to save a file, or you have to save a folder, or you have to save a movie file, database file. You can save anything. That's why in S3 we just call them in terms of objects. So in S3 this number indicates that if you try to upload 1 billion objects in S3 over the period of 100 years, what AWS guarantees you is you can expect 99.999, that is only one object is the reliability that they are taking into consideration. I mean, the error budget, right? So that means if you have 1 billion objects that you're uploading, that is 100 crore objects that you're uploading over a period of 100 years, AWS says that there is a chance of only one object getting deleted. Rest all will be safe. So you can assume that in S3, your object will never get deleted. That is because of the replication mechanism of AWS. So what AWS does is whenever you store this object here, right? So you are creating this in US East 1 region. I have created in US East 1 region. What S3 does is it creates multiple replicas of this. Okay. So in one region, there are multiple availability zones, right? In one availability zone, there are multiple data centers. What AWS does is it creates multiple copies of this index.html, so that even if one of the data center, one of the availability zone goes down, still you have copies of this S3 in multiple places, so that it can be replaced automatically. So your data in AWS is almost like, there is 1 in 1 billion in 100 years that your object can be deleted in S3, and that is very, very, very rare. Okay, so that is something. Now, once you create an object here, so index.html is an object, then what you can play around with it. Like you can just go here and you can also delete this object, right? So just click on this. You have actions here, just like we do with the EC2 instances. What we do there, we create an instance, we delete an instance, we upload multiple EC2 instances, create multiple instances. Similarly, you can create multiple S3 buckets. You can add multiple documents to this S3 bucket, which are objects in S3 bucket. You can play around with it, try deleting. Like you can explore all the options here. There is a delete option here. As you click on it, you can also delete it. But now let me take a step back and explain you about other characteristics of S3, and then we can go back and understand what are the other options that are available on the AWS S3 UI. Okay, so if we go to this specific slide now, benefits and advantages of S3. So if organizations have to trust S3, and if they have to upload their information to S3, AWS has to provide them some kind of characteristics, right? So these are the 5 major advantages of AWS S3. That is, S3 is highly available and durable. S3 is highly scalable. S3 has very good amount of security. Like you can configure S3 security. We will also do that in the demonstration. We will cover the security part in the demonstration. Don't worry. There is cost effectiveness that is added to S3. That means, like I told you, even if you save 1 TB of information, you can keep it throughout the year, and you will be costed very less amount, kind of $4 a year or something. If you use the cheapest storage class of S3, we will see that. Then the performance point of view. So what is performance? Like I told you, S3 creates multiple copies, right? So if you create S3 in a region that is nearby you, then you can quickly access the content in S3. You can download it, you can upload the content very quickly. And along with that, what also S3 does is it will add more things related to performance. For example, you want to upload a huge file. If you want to upload a 4 TB file, so what happens most of the times is either because of your internet connection or because of multiple factors, your upload keeps on going, and sometimes uh, you might have a power cut or you might have any issues. So the upload takes days and days also. So to solve this problem, what AWS said is, okay, I'll come up with a concept called multi-part uploads. So even in case of some kind of these issues, AWS, you can define that, okay, upload 100 MB, 100 MB chunks, and using this multi-part upload in AWS S3, so you can upload a huge size of a file, and even there is some mishap, AWS will retry that process and it will continue your upload thing. So there are these characteristics in performance, but the primary four things are availability, durability, scalability, security, and cost efficiency. I just discussed about the reliability. The first part is the availability and durability. It is 99.119 reliable. So 1 billion of data objects throughout 100 years, S3 says that there can be a chance of only one object getting deleted. That much reliable S3 is. And in general, even if you look about Amazon, cloud storage services are very, very reliable. And within that, AWS S3 is the most reliable. Next thing, scalability. So what does scalability mean here is, like, you can start with AWS S3. Like in my case, I've started with AWS S3. I just uploaded a index.html, and the scalability here means you can keep uploading how much amount of data that is required, and AWS S3 will not restrict you. The only restriction is, for example, here I've uploaded index.html, right? So the size of index.html should not exceed 5 TB. So TB is usually a very huge data, right? In this case, the index.html file that I've uploaded is 103 bytes. So it is a very, very small file. Now, what AWS says is the file that you can upload for one object should not exceed 5 TB, which is very much more. Let's say you have a file that is more than 5 TB, you have to break that file. Okay. And what the other thing is, you can keep expanding your bucket to how much ever things want. Like you can put 10 TB files, or you can put 55 TB files. AWS will not restrict you. Security. So what does the security mean? So if you're storing your database objects, or if you're storing your application log files or any sensitive information, any organization will ask you about the security point. Okay, I'm storing all my files with you, but how much secure are you? So what AWS says is, we will provide you a lot of options. One is, any object that you try to put, you can store that information with encryption. So there are two things: encryption at rest and encryption at transit. AWS supports both of these encryptions, and AWS has a lot of ACLs, that is access control list. AWS has bucket policies. You can restrict the permissions on who can access these buckets. You can lock the objects. So we will try to see the demonstration as well. Like I'll show you by creating an S3 bucket. We will use another IAM user who has access to full S3, but still, as a bucket owner, I'll try to restrict that other person to not to access my files. I'll show you that thing as well. Then encryption of data, just like I mentioned, there is logging mechanism that you can enable. So who is trying to access objects to your S3 bucket? You can record all this information of the user, the IAM details of the user. And if there is any suspicious activities, you can integrate them with CloudWatch, and you can also send notifications through LAMBDA functions. So there are multiple things in terms of security. Object locking, like I mentioned. And the next concept is cost efficiency. Like I told you, AWS S3 is very, very cheap, very, very cost effective, but it depends on the storage class that you are selecting. I repeated this previously also, that it depends on storage class. Now you might be wondering, what is this storage class? So what AWS says is, whenever you are even purchasing your laptop, or whenever you are purchasing a hard disk, so storage comes in two important points. One is, do you want a cheap storage where if you want to read data, or if you want to write data into your hard disk, right? So do you want it to be extensive, or like if the data has to be very quickly read? and if the data has to be very quickly written, then that kind of hard disks are very, very costly. Whereas if you are not bothering about it, like you can say that I'm not worried about my input output operations, but only thing that I'm worried is about the storage, then that kind of things you will get for less cost, right? You have SSDs, you have HDDs, right? So what is the difference between them? When you want high input output, that means if let's say I'm uploading a file, it has to be quickly written on the disk. If I'm reading the file from the disk, then it has to quickly give me the output. If you want that kind of things, then the storage will be slightly costlier. If you say that I don't want those kind of things, all that I want is a service where you can store data, even if the input output is slow, I don't have any problem, then that kind of storage options will be less cost. In AWS, those things are called as storage classes. S3 has multiple storage classes. So these are all the different types of storage classes. You can find very much details about this one in my GitHub document and also in the AWS official documentation. Specifically, AWS official documentation for S3 is very, very good. You can simply go to it and you can read everything about S3. So if you see here, these are the storage classes. One is the S3 standard. So this the thing that comes out of the box is the S3 standard. Then you have S3 standard IA, one zone IA. You have S3 Glacier, Glacier instant retrieval. You have Glacier deep archive. You have intelligent tiering outpost. So there are multiple options, but you don't have to worry about this one. Now you might say that Abhishek, if there are so many options, how can I choose one that is best for me? So it depends on the type of data that you're storing, and it depends on what your organization needs. So if you see here, AWS is clearly giving you metrics. So let's say, what is the cost? Do you want cost effectiveness? Do you want access time effectiveness? Do you want durability? Durability is something that I just discussed, right? If you see here, AWS said 100%, but if you say 99.99999 that means it's 100% durable, right? Availability 99.9% and minimum storage duration. So it depends on the storage class to storage class. So primarily it boils down to two things. One is, do you want cost effective solution or do you want access time effective solution? So with your organization needs, you can choose that thing. If you want cheapest storage service, then you can go with S3 Glacier Deep Archive, where the access time is very, very late. If you see here, 12 to 48 hours. So if you put one AWS object into S3 Glacier Deep Archive, then to retrieve that object, then you might take a lot of time to retrieve it. But if you see the cost of it, then it is almost negligible. Whereas on the contrary, if you take this specific object, so what AWS says is for 1 GB, if you store the objects in S3 standard, then it will cost you 0.02. You might feel 0.02 is less, but in organization, when we are talking about databases, when we are talking about TBs of data, then this will convert into dollars, not $0.0. Okay. So sit with your development team, try to understand the requirements, sit with your managers, product owners, and then you have to define what kind of storage solution do you want. If you want to learn more about it and deep dive each and every aspect of the storage classes, then I will recommend you to go through the AWS official documentation. Okay. So after this, now what I'll do is I'll explain you about this concept of using multiple things on the S3 buckets. First things first, whenever we are dealing with S3 buckets, you might be thinking, okay, Abhishek, now this is the file that I've stored. Okay, let's take an example of a index.html, or let's take the example of a log file. Today I have this log file. Tomorrow I'll have a new log file of the same application, right? And day after tomorrow I'll have a new log file. If you take example of Git, what Git does, let's say there is a file, and if there is a code changes to the file, what happens is tomorrow, if someone comes to me and says that, hey, this file that you have uploaded yesterday is wrong, can you give me day before yesterday's file? You can simply go to Git, retrieve the old version of it, and you can give them back. You can do the same thing with AWS as well. AWS S3 is also a versioned solution. What is it? It's a versioned solution. That means, see, now I have an index.html, right? What AWS does is whenever you're storing this object, AWS tries to remember these things. What is the type of it? What is the last modified date of it? what is the size of it, and what is the storage class of it. And when I remodify this file, let me go to my local and show you. If I take a terminal, okay, now here in my downloads folder, I have this file called index.html. Now what I'll do is I'll just come here and save this file. And when I try to upload, by default, okay, by default, S3 will not allow me to upload because you need to enable versioning on it. Let's see what happens if I don't enable versioning. So I'm here. Now let me try to upload the same file. Okay, let me click on this one. And if I try to upload, you will notice that where is the upload button? Sorry, yeah. So you will notice that AWS, oh, I think I've enabled versioning here. Let me go back and see. Is the versioning enabled when we created this bucket? If we go here, if you go to the properties of this, bucket versioning is disabled. Okay, was the index.html not available already? Oh, okay. Uh, Yeah, my bad here. What S3 has done is S3 has replaced this file, right? So by default, if you already have a file, S3 will replace the file. So, but if I want to store multiple copies of it, just like the thing that we have discussed, if you want to store multiple copies in Git, what Git does is Git is a version platform. So it allows the versioning concept. Now in S3 also, what you can do is you can go to the properties, click on this bucket versioning, click on the edit button, and you can enable the bucket versioning. So here, if I enable the bucket versioning, what will happen now? See that if you go to this object, and now let me try to re-upload this object. But before that, I have to make some changes to it, right? So let me open my terminal, index.html. Let me remove these blank spaces so that there will be a change in the file. And let me try to upload the same file. Upload, add files, index.html, open. Click on the upload button. Now you will notice that if you go back, click on this properties button and refresh it. Okay, so you will notice that the bucket versioning is enabled. And if you go to the objects, versions, you have two copies of this version, right? So this is one copy that I have created just now, and this is the previous copy of the S3 bucket, right? So this way, what happens is you can create multiple versions of it. There is no restriction. Like you can keep on creating the versions, and whenever someone asks you for an old version, you can just give them the old version. You can download the specific version. So this way, you can not only use S3 buckets for storing the data, but you can also use S3 as a versioning system. So similarly, we use GitHub. You can use S3 also as a versioning system, but the problem is that it does not have the code reviews or those things. So that's why it is not extensively used as a version control system, but it has that capability. So let's explore the other options in S3 bucket before I go to the demo part. So this is a bucket. Now let's see what are the different properties that it supports. Bucket versioning is something that we have just taken a look. Tags, we will come to the concept of tags. It is basically for identifying the resources. You can say that, you can just create a tag for it saying that project and which project that this belongs to. This belongs to app1 project. And you can create a tag. This is just for identifying. As a DevOps engineers, we have multiple buckets, multiple EC2 instances across the accounts. So if someone says that, hey, can you give me a list of S3 buckets that is used by this specific project, then we can make use of these tags. And we can enforce tags. We can say that every organization or every project that you are working with, they have to create tags for sure. And that way it will be easy for us to extract the data. Default encryption. So like I told you, S3 has recently added the default encryption. Previously, you should have enabled the encryption on the objects, but now the bucket encryption is available by default. Intelligent tiering archive options, you don't have to worry about it right now. Access logging, like I told you, you can enable this access logging. By default, this is disabled. If you enable the access logging, then it will ask you like, okay, tell me what should be the policy here. And then you can enable this access logging to ensure who is logging into this bucket, what kind of actions they are performing. And like I told you, you can also restrict them. You can remove their access. You can send out the notifications depending upon the actions that they are performing. Event notifications, if you have been following our channel, I did a complete demonstration. I think it's a 45 minutes demonstration on event notifications, and this is very, very useful. But for this, you need to understand the concept of Lambda functions as well. So I will redo this entire video when we complete the Lambda functions, where I have demonstrated event notifications. Firstly, I'll put the link in the description. So if anyone is interested, they can go through that video. But for that, you need to understand the concept of Lambda functions, right? So if you don't understand the concept of Lambda functions, better not to go through it because you will be confused. But that was a very good project where I have explained the project that was used by Netflix, and I have demonstrated the end-to-end of it. Event bridge is also used in the same scenario. We will also cover this event bridging and event notifications. You can also check that in my course syllabus, where I have mentioned that we will talk about these things. Then there is object locking. Let's say once I upload the object into the bucket, I want to lock the object so that nobody else should use that object, and that is locked. There should not be any updates to the object, right? So if someone wants to update the object, then they cannot update the object. Probably some sensitive information which you have decided that nobody has to override, then you can use the bucket locking. Then you have static website hosting, which we will cover as part of the demo. So in demo part, what we will do is we will cover the two things. One is we will cover this static website hosting. I'll show how organizations can host a static website using the S3 concept. Because S3 is globally accessible, then it is a very good platform for hosting your static website. As it is accessible for anywhere in the world, if you just want to say that open the public access, open access to everyone, like anyone in the bucket should access it, then you can access this thing entirely from public, entirely from world. So S3 is the cheapest service as well if you want to host your static website. But for that, you should do a minor modification, which I'll cover in the demo part. But first demo that I'll do is with respect to the bucket permissions. So right now, all the information in this bucket is available with all the people in this organization, right? Only thing is they should just have permissions to S3 buckets. If they have permissions to S3 buckets, they can come to your S3 bucket as well, and they can store or they can read the information. So let's say that you are a DevOps engineer and you want to store some very sensitive information of a specific project. And you want to say that even if people from other projects have access to S3, like in their IAM policies, it says that S3 all. So they can access everything, every S3 bucket, but I want to restrict them specifically for this bucket because this bucket has sensitive information. How will you do that? Is using the bucket permissions. So even if someone has misconfigured the IAM rules, even if someone has configured IAM policies to provide access to every bucket, as a bucket owner, I can restrict access to my bucket using the bucket permissions. So let's try to see how that is possible. Now, this bucket is open. I just have index.html. Everyone in the organization can access it. Condition, they should have access to S3 buckets. So let's do that. Let us create an IAM user. Okay. We'll start right from the starting. So I'll go to the IAM users tab and I'll create an IAM user. So what I need to do is go to the users, create a user. Let's call this as demo S3 buckets user. This user should have permissions to the AWS management console. I want to create IAM user. Let me give custom password so that I will not waste time for this auto-generated password and change it. So custom password, let me keep it as something. Okay. And then users must create a new password. I don't want it because I can save time. Click on the next button. Okay, let me attach the policy directly. What I'll do is I will grant, okay, firstly, let me not grant anything. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just say next. I'm not granting any permissions to show you that by default, no one will be able to access it because they don't have even permissions to S3 buckets. But okay, let's start from there. Now I will open an incognito window. Let me take a new private window. And in the new private window, let me open the AWS thing. Sorry, AWS console. Let me increase the font for you. So this is the new private window. I can also keep them side by side. So this is a new private window, and this is the AWS console of mine. Okay, so here we have created the bucket. I have created the IAM user. It says publicly accessible. Sorry, this is the one. So index.html is available. Now let me log into this account. Let me use IAM user, the IAM user that I just created. What was it? Demo. Uh, Let me copy that exact name. Users, yeah, demo S3 bucket user. But before that, I need to put the account number, right? So let me copy this account ID and let me paste it here. Account ID is pasted. Now let me take the demo S3 bucket username and let's try to put the password. Okay. So here the S3 bucket is created by the root user, and this person does not have permissions for anything on the AWS, and they don't have permissions to S3 as well. So what should be the expected output here? The expected output is if they search for S3, like I'm doing it here, go to the buckets. You don't have permissions to list the buckets, which is expected behavior, right? Now let's go and grant this person IAM permissions for S3 bucket. How do I do that? Just go to this user, scroll down, you'll find something as permissions, add permissions, attach policies directly, search for S3. Let me give S3 full access. Okay. Scroll down, click on next, add permissions. Now this IAM user, which I logged in here, now should be able to see the bucket. Okay. So just refresh one more time. It will take little time to reflect. Yeah. So now I can see all the buckets here. Let me increase this a bit. So I can see all the buckets here, right? So this is the bucket that I have just created. So let me click on this bucket. So what this person can do is, even though you are the bucket owner and this file is very sensitive for you, but still this person, because has access to all the S3 buckets, they can simply come here, click on this option and download the file. So now I was able to download the file. You see that the file is downloaded. Now my task is, as a DevOps engineer, let me keep this aside now. So the task is that as a DevOps engineer, now I want to restrict such actions, even if they have access to S3 buckets. But as a bucket owner, I want to say that nobody should access my buckets. For that, what I'll do is go to my S3 bucket, and there is a specific option in the buckets that is called as bucket permissions. In the bucket permissions, you have this specific field called bucket policy. In the bucket policy, just edit it. You can define who can access your bucket And right now, what I want to do is block everyone, only give permissions for myself. Now, you might say that, Abhishek, I don't know how to write this JSON. Don't worry. There is an option here for you. Click on this called add statement. All that you need to know here is you need to know statement is very generic. It is just like a name of what you want to put. Let me say block all public access. Okay. Principal. So here principal stands for whom do you want to perform this action against? I want to perform against everyone in this AWS. Okay. So everyone in AWS should not have this access. So what I'm saying is principal as star. What should I want? I want them to deny. So effect is deny. What is the action? Just click here, search for the service. The service is S3. All actions on this S3 should be denied. Which S3 is it? Provide the S3 bucket number. Okay. Just click on add a resource. What is your thing? S3 bucket. What is the name of the bucket? It is so easy to write these actions. App 1 payments. You should take care of spellings. App 1 payments hyphen prod hyphen example.com. I hope this is correct. Click on the add resource. Okay. So now what I'm saying is anyone in this AWS organization should be blocked with accessing the resources. But one thing that you need to take care is if you're blocking everyone, then you're blocking yourself as well. So this statement should be ignored just for you. Everyone in the organization should not have access, but at least as a bucket owner, you should have access to it. So for that, you should add a condition. Okay. So what is the condition? So the condition says that for the AWS principal ARN, okay, who is that principal ARN? Basically, that principal ARN is strings not equals. That means except me. This action should be executed for everyone. So what I'm doing, except for strings not equals to this principal ARN. Okay, what is my ARN? Basically, I can copy. I have an example. AWS principal ARN. You can copy this thing from my GitHub. You don't have to worry. Just provide the AWS account ID here. Okay. What is my AWS account ID? I can get it from here. Now add this condition. So once you add the condition, then what is happening here? You are denying. So you are denying access to this specific S3 resource, all the objects in S3 resource for everyone except this condition where if the person who is accessing is this one, then they are given an exception. That is if the bucket owner, this is my account and this is my user. So if the bucket owner is accessing it, then give an exception. If not the bucket owner, then everybody should be denied the access. Now let me save these changes. You don't have, okay, there is some issue. Let me see what has happened. Let me edit this one. Okay, there was a small correction. Let me try now. Okay. So I missed a very basic thing. I just, missed to put this specific thing where for the bucket and for the resources inside the bucket. So this is corrected in my GitHub. When you copy it, you don't have to worry about it. So it is very easy to write this JSON by taking help of the AWS resource generator. Okay. So now I have saved this content. Let me try it from the other user, right? So this is the other user that I have signed in from the AWS incognito. Previously, they were able to access the resource. Now let me go back and try to refresh. If I go into this bucket, insufficient permissions to list objects, you have noticed that this specific person, this specific IAM user has access to S3 buckets, all the global S3 buckets, but still they are failing to read the objects or download the objects. That is because of this bucket permissions that we have enabled. And this is one of the most important responsibilities of administrators and DevOps engineers. As a DevOps engineer, you should be able to write these bucket configurations. So you can take help of the generator, or you can also practice it by yourself, where you can try it with multiple examples. Right now I've blocked for everyone. Now you can try giving access to one specific person, giving access to your specific team. Play with the AWS generator. It is very, very easy. So this is your demo one, where I wanted to show you how to restrict access for people who have access to S3 buckets, but you just want to block them for your specific bucket using the bucket policies or using the bucket permissions. So we have done it. Now let's try with the second demo, that is how to host a static website. Like I told you, why you should host a static website on S3, because one is S3 is a very cheap solution. If not, you have to go to any hosting platform. In AWS directly, I told you, you can purchase the domain using Route 53. You can use CDN service, CloudFront, which we'll cover in future videos. But at the end of the day, that will be very cheap service that you can get on any other hosting platform. So if you want to host your static website, then S3 is a good one. I have my index.html here. Let me tell you that as a DevOps engineer, you might not do this as frequently. This will be a one-time activity and mostly done by your developers, but it is good to understand the workflow. So I already have an index.html. The only thing that you have to do is create a bucket, and inside the bucket, you need to upload your index.html. So in my case, index.html is a very simple one. You can copy any index.html from W3 schools, or if you know how to write an index.html, you can also do that. So I've taken a very basic index.html and I have uploaded this to my bucket. Now, all that I need to do is go to the bucket properties. And if you scroll down, you will find something called as static website hosting. Edit it, enable the static website hosting. By default, there is this option, host a static website. And what is your index document? So just provide the index document of yours. In my case, it is index.html. I don't have any error page, or I don't want to do any error page configuration, so I'm fine. Now let me just click on this button, save changes. Okay, so now it is successfully saved, and you can see that my index.html is successfully saved for static website hosting. But even after doing this, what happens is, okay, if you go down, you will get a URL where AWS says is, okay, access this URL and you should be able to access your static website. But if you click on this one, you will get a forbidden error. The reason why you are getting forbidden error is because of this thing. If you go back to the properties, you will notice that when you created the bucket, you said that public access to the bucket is disabled, right? So here you said block all public access. So go here, say, just uncheck this one, click on the save changes, click on confirm. So now what has happened is you have blocked all the public access. Sometimes if you are performing this demo, there is a star mark here. What I want to tell you is there is a possibility that at your account level, permission is disabled for you to uncheck this box. So even at the organization level, there is an option called block all public access. If that is enabled, even if you try to do it from here, then you will not be able to do it. In that case, what you need to do is at your organization level, you have to uncheck this box. And previous bucket policy that I've put, let me remove that previous bucket policy, right? And let me save this option. And if you try now, okay, let's see what happens now. Still, there is access denied. You might ask me that, Abhishek, now I have done everything. I have opened all the public access. You will see that all the public access is open, and you will also see that the index.html is uploaded. Now, what should I do again? One final thing that you have to do is you need to go to the permission section and you need to add a new bucket policy that is regarding get all objects access for everyone in the internet. So again, you can copy this from my GitHub repository. It's a very simple one where you have this simple statement, which is saying effect allow principal star. That means everyone, give everyone S3 bucket get object permissions on the bucket name you have to provide. Okay. So what is the bucket name here? The bucket name is app1 hyphen payment prod example.com. Okay. Now let's save this and see what will happen. Perfect. My first heading, my first paragraph, I have taken a basic example from W3 schools. You can be fancy, you can try out whatever things that you want. Only condition is when you are trying it, make sure that you don't have extensive JavaScript, which JavaScript is downloading something from other websites, or sometimes in JavaScript you have API calls that gets information from other websites. If you use such rich JavaScript, then you need to enable something called as CORS, CORS, CORS. And why you need to enable that is because when you do that, your browsers will automatically reject. Okay, so when you have JavaScript that gets information from other APIs, and if that code is available in your S3 bucket or something, your browser will by default restrict it. In such cases, you have to enable CORS. But what is CORS? Why you need to do that? We will try to cover when we learn about CloudFront, where we will do a very good project, same project, but we will try to implement CloudFront, we will try to implement CDN, and we will try to do a better project. If that is not possible in the 30 days course, at least I will try to do it after this entire thing. After the 30 days course, I'll try to do a full video using all of these things and using course. But for now, you can ignore that and try to do these 2 demos. And let me know in the comment section if you were able to follow this thing and if you were able to do all of these things. I hope you like this video. And okay, one final thing that I forgot to tell you was regarding the versioning. I told you that, when we are doing this, you need to enable versioning and you need to create multiple copies of it. But how does AWS become cost effectiveness, right? How it is cost effective. So what you can do is in AWS, basically you have this multiple storage classes, right? So you can say, let's say the latest version can use this particular storage class, and the previous version, what you can say is delete the previous version after 10 days, or delete the previous versions after 5 days. Or you can also say that whenever there is a previous version, send it to S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So that way you can reduce the cost. That is something that I forgot and I wanted to tell you. But don't worry, all these things are very easily available on the AWS documentation. All the important things I have covered, and you can also try the practical things. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you like the video, click on the like button. If you have any feedback, please share that to me in the comment section. I'll happily take the feedback. See you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.